Okay, Tuesday chat, and I am thinking that the slow period over the winter, even though it's still winter for quite a while yet, is pretty much over, because as soon as the days start getting lighter, I feel a lot better, even though it's only just past the middle of winter. So I think we should be having videos just about every day, which is good. One of you made the comment that it feels a bit like a little international model club, which is quite a nice way to think of it. You know, when I was starting the channel, I was comparing myself to all of these guys that did the very, very laid out and well choreographed and edited build type of videos, and I wasn't able to do that, and I thought you know, it's going to be really difficult just making videos and talking about models, but it seems to be going not too badly. So I mean, I'm certainly not going to be changing to making those choreographed build videos, even when I'm doing more formal builds like the motorbikes and so on, and showing the stages very regularly. They still won't be those type of choreographed build videos. Okay, well, I have got the wings glued on the HS125. That came out beautifully. I handled that very, very well. That was tube glue. Not a drop of mess. I need to clean up the leading edge a little bit, but very, very nicely handled, if I must say so. You know, absolutely nothing oozing out there. A little bit of cleanup on the leading edge, but you'd hardly notice anything. And the way Matchbox made the kit with it fitting inside like that helps a lot, of course. So wings done nicely. Now when I'm building the wings, as I've stated many times, I'm looking at that, but I'm looking at it before I even build, because if there's some warping, I want to get rid of that if possible, or if it was very, very minor, then I'd want to be putting a little bit of pressure on it, but this is just a very, very good model. Windows in, again, very, very nice. Matchbox handled that beautifully. No mess, no glue coming out. It is close to flush with the surface. If I was wanting to be highly perfectionistic about this one, I would have liked it to be a little bit more perfectly flush, such that if you took, and I wouldn't do that, but if you took your sandpaper and rubbed it over there, you'd be rubbing plastic and window equally. But this is ever so slightly recessed, but I mean, for this build, absolutely perfect. The door is also a bit recessed. If you catch that, you just see that it's recessed a bit, and I wasn't going to bother fixing that. I could have fixed it, but it's no big deal. Very simple cockpit inside, all good. But one thing I do want to speak about is something that I could have got perfectly correct and didn't get perfectly correct. So what I did is I glued the entire half all around that and held it in place. I had test fitted and it looked very, very close, and if I show you on video now, it might not even come through, but top surface, and that's after a little bit of sanding and buffing, pretty much perfect. So there's, you know, there's no step. It's very, very good all the way there. But on the bottom side, and that's what I want to say here, I have stated that certainly on larger ones, don't do the whole thing. Focus on a particular area so that you can pay attention and ensure and give a little bit more pressure either way to make sure that you're getting an absolutely flat surface there. And this is a very nice one to be able to see that. So yes, I was focusing on getting that really, really good as I was holding it drying. The front section, not bad at all, hardly any problem. But this little section over here, you can just catch it in the shadow there, ever so slight step. And I didn't need to have that. I would have liked to say that I did this absolutely perfectly, and I didn't. And the reason is I glued it all in one go. So if I had left off the glue off the entire bottom surface, focused completely on getting the top right, could have even left that front section because you've got access underneath. So when that is dry, you'd have to do the whole tail in one go because you're not really going to get, well, you'd be chancing getting a bit of mess on there. That's very easy to put a bit of glue in there and then get that little part right, just that top section. And then when that's all done, then you can even get a bit of glue under there to get that section right. And then you'd have to just put a bit of liquid glue on this and sit and get that right. So this would have needed a little bit of pressure one way to shunt that mismatch ever so slightly up. I mean, it's probably less than 1/10 of a millimeter, but I like to try and be perfectionistic when it was possible, for no other reason than to challenge myself. So a little bit in a rush. I wanted to get this built pretty quickly so I can get back to the Phantoms. On the other hand, it's not that serious a build. This is going onto the shelf as a representative of my late 70s builds, even though this one would be far superior to the way I would have handled it originally. There would have been glue mess on my original one. But anyway, coming on very, very nicely. Now the next thing that I want to speak about on there, I'm first going to speak about on this one. So remember the tail was broken off yesterday. So that's glued on. I did a little bit of cleanup because it was super glue and I didn't want to super glue it back. I wanted plastic on plastic bond. Now just to speak about that a little bit. Super glue is a brittle bond, which means that if you put a little bit of pressure on this, you could crack it off again fairly easily. And that's obviously what had been done once or twice before. And then in packaging it had snapped off again in you know, when the old guy packed up his models. So I sat there with the blade and scraped off, and it's quite easy to see when you're scraping off super glue. It's a different feel. It's a harder feel compared to plastic. You know when you've got down to plastic. So I was scraping and sanding a little bit till I was down to plastic on both the horizontal stabilizer part and on the top of the fin part, and then glued with a nice amount of plastic glue. Plastic glue, when you've bonded plastic to plastic, this thing will withstand way more force than if you just super glued it before. Now I don't want to put a ton of force on this. It is, after all, still a very low surface area joint in there. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, now that I've got it on and it's very easy to tilt, there's basically nothing giving you any arrangement on there other than your visual, because it has already broken off that little top pin there, which is very small anyway. So now I'm visually checking it, and as I have mentioned before, you dip it down and you see where it matches the wings. So you see that one touches and then that one doesn't touch yet. So I was doing that and I was matching it to the wings, and yet it was looking wrong. And in the end I decided to go for eyeball mark 1 and get that dead perfectly 90 degrees, which you can see it looks right now. But what that means is the wings are not perfect. So be careful of, you know, using that visual cross mark of setting this to the correct angle so that it exactly matches, which ideally would match exactly touching that point on the wings and that point on the wings, leading edge. You can go to trailing edge. There's multiple ways that you can see it. Where does it touch the engines, then the leading edge, then the trailing edge. So this model, and you can see why that has happened, has got the tab, but there isn't a whole lot to determine the exact position of this wing. You know, yes, it should touch on that flat surface, and that has got, you're going to see that, it's got a slight dip in it, which is quite nice. Some kits have done that, and this is very nice of Matchbox to have done it then. It allows for a bit of glue recess into there, and it allows this to touch only on the outer rim of that aerofoil. But despite that, you can see that it is possible that as someone was gluing this, your one wing could end up a little bit different to the other wing, because the join there is not perfect enough. So for this model, it's totally fine, because the only way you'd ever know it is if I showed it to you like that. So anyway, that's good. I'll come back to that now. Back to this one. So for me not to make the same mistake as that, two things. That joint into there of that tab, I just check if I do that. Yep, so that shows me that there's quite a bit of play in there, and I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is put a thin piece of plastic card onto there, try and figure out till when I slot that in there, it actually fits very, very well, like almost zero play. And then there should at that point be only the absolute minimum vertical movement. And when I put on the two wings, then I would have to use a last measure like, if I can get my ruler out here. Now you can do this in two ways, because you don't want to glue on both wings at the same time. So you glue on this wing as perfectly as possible, and once that's dry, you take note with a ruler of the exact tip to you choose pinpoint measures. So you measure from that tip of the tail onto the tip of the wingtip, get the measure. And then when you're putting on this one, again, having put a bit of plastic card onto there, as that one's drying, you can do that same measure, because an increase in dihedral or decrease is going to affect that measure quite a bit. You can also do it straight to a mark on the fuselage there. If you find one of the panel lines, which there's panel lines over there, so you can take it like that as well, but that long triangle is sometimes not as accurate as the closer to 60. Well, that's sort of a, well, it's a bigger triangle in any case. You can see what I mean there. That triangle versus that triangle, but every measure that you use. So that should give you absolutely perfect wing setup, great fit inside, nice glue joint. Just watch for the fore aft movement. This doesn't appear to have any fore aft movement, but some kits do. So you just want to make sure that by the time this even goes in there without glue, you're already as close to perfect as possible. Now I just like to do those, I'm thinking about those things that as I'm doing a build, even if the build is a quick build like this one. Because I mean, after all, I am doing the builds to practice building skill, so that when I get to the builds that I really don't want to have anything wrong on, like for instance, I suppose you could compare it slightly to those to the Phantom tailplanes and the repairs of that Tiger Moth. I'm already facing a number of hurdles that I need to overcome, so I'd like some of the basics to be well in place. Anyway, this one will be done maybe by the end of tonight. There's engines. I will put the undercarriage down. I guess I should put a little bit of nose weight. I'll put a small amount of nose weight in there. I'll just grab something from the garage here just now. So that one's just about done, and then we'll put decals on that. And then I wanted to just point one thing out. So while I'm sanding that, using This is 800. You can get that buff, that gloss. Can I catch this in the light? I can't quite catch that shininess of the plastic in the light here. But using the back of the paper, you can buff. So once it's already smooth, you can buff it back to looking like the manufacturer level of plastic. No sand marks at all with the back of the paper. You buff that out very nicely. It doesn't quite work the same, but it works to a degree if you have filler in there. But I'm not doing any filler on this model, and it doesn't need it. So this looks like it's going to be an interesting project, and one or two of you did comment on that. Now the horizontal stabs broke off, and I was busy pondering, you know, that's the broken joints up there in line. But since I'm changing this model, I'm actually going to do them down. So it'll become a conventional tail plane. And what I might do is change the shape of this to make it look less walrusy and a little bit more modern. I won't change anything about those wings. You notice they're at quite a high angle of attack visually compared to what it looks like the fuselage should be at, but obviously it flew at about that angle then. So those will get moved. I will do that soon. These wings, this one wing wasn't glued on very well. You see it's got that gap there, but I don't know if that's going to break off very easily. I might just leave that. I mean, again, this is not meant to be a perfectionist build. This is just having a bit of fun. So I'll need to see what engines I can find. We could do 2 jet engines, one under each wing. We could do, as someone suggested, a single jet engine on top. I could do props, but I think it'll look interesting as a jet. And I will take off that little turret and close that up, make it look a little bit more sleek. Luckily, totally unused canopy, very nice there. We could put weapons on it, but I don't think I'm going to go to that level, and I'm not going to do anything about that. I'll just put the wheels up in there. So quite simple, actually. Cockpit, yeah, probably should do a little bit, get the pilots in there on seats and something to stop you seeing out the back of the aircraft like that, which I'll have to do. Working through the hole there. Probably take that turret off there, make that nice and smooth. So that'll be an interesting one as well. I'll dig around and see what engines I can find for that. And that is my update for now. Oh, I was just going to say this color which I mentioned. But in hindsight, I'm thinking that it sort of does give it this quite nice aged look. You know, it's not a very good paint job. It's hand painted, but it does give it that nice aged look as it is like that. So in a diorama, this will fit quite well. Could even maybe do a bit more weathering, give it a little bit more dirt on the wings. I just need to figure out what I would do with that then. Maybe use that one with the Piper Cherokee, which I mentioned. Okay, well, happy modeling, and I hope you enjoy that video. Cheers.